Thank you for coming. You're at the Building Your Budget Peer Workshop. That wasn't where you intended to be. I won't take any offense if you want to go somewhere else. But this is where we are. We're going to be talking about budgets. Awesome. I'm going to introduce myself. I am John Bowden. This is really low. My name is John Bowden. I am the Director of Financial Services at the Kitchener-Waterloo Community Foundation. I'm a staff member at the KWCF. I get to be here because I am the numbers guy, right? I'm the finance guy. I get to live in the world of budgets and reports and all that stuff. Awesome. I do like it. And so because that's what we're talking about here, and asked me to present a little bit, I will say right off the bat, I am not generally all that involved in the grant application side of things. So as the finance guy, I don't actually review some of this stuff. So my conversation, as we walk through today, I want to try and give a little bit of overview here. We're going to deal with the kind of welcoming overview. We're going to talk about the requested financial reports and what that means, why we ask for them and what we do with them and what that looks like for you. We'll talk about strengthening the budget. I had a chance to look at, in developing this workshop and from kind of some of the developing the whole peer concepts. What's this working about? We had questions, but we need some help on that. What's that look like? We have the advantage of seeing lots of applications. Recognizing in your case, you probably get to see one application, or the numbers that you see are likely the 4 or 5 grant applications that you kick out that all look like the same one that you had done, right? So you don't necessarily know. We have this other perspective to see some of them that are stronger than others, shall we say. So we wanted to try and just share some of that information. If you're an organization, when you walk away from here 45 minutes from now and go, no kidding, okay, sorry, great, you've probably got your budget stuff under control and you know what all this is. You're probably not our target audience. We're targeting this more to people just, I'm not really sure what this is. I hate the numbers stuff. I wish somebody else could do that part. So we want to try and just give you some of that information. So how to strengthen the application, what stronger applications look like. And then we'll try and provide a few tips and tricks and some experience that I've learned personally over the years in doing some of this and things that we know and that we see. So that's where we go. That's where we're going to go today. To try and land this practically, we have however many different organizations, 25, 30 different organizations represented. I don't know what you're doing. Your program is your program, and I have no idea. And so it's tough. I didn't want to try and pick one, but by the same token, I wanted to pick something. So I'm going to use an example that we talked through about a grant application, a sample grant application from Active Kids KW soccer camps. Let me tell you right off the bat, this organization does not exist. We made it up. All right. So the things that I tell you, it's all fake. And please don't flood us with soccer camp applications. This is not the magic bullet. We're not granting, this isn't the magic template. Here we go. I wanted to try and just land an example about what we're talking about as we work this through. So we're going to use this as an example. And a little bit about my fictitious organization. Active Kids KW is a local charity focused on engaging children and youth in sports and activities to promote health and well-being. Pretty noble. Tells us a little bit about who we are. As part of our programming, we run an annual 5-week summer camps year-round soccer. We employ summer students to do that as the coaches and coordinators. 5 one-week camps, right? So we have students or participants who come, they learn about soccer, they play games, we do the quasi-babysitting through the summer, as it were, and the kids get to socialize and get engaged in skills with soccer. That's the main focus, how our summer camps work. We're looking for funding from the KWCF Community Foundation Grants Program for an end-of-camp parent-youth event. Right? The event is designed to increase the sense of belonging in both the participants and their families. There's a theme, right? We're all about belonging at KWCF, and that's what we want to tie. Here's a little bit of the background on that. We're looking to do a barbecue for parents and an event. We've seen, the individual camp runs about 50 participant students, or 50 campers. We see the parents drop off the kids in the morning and they pick them up in the afternoon. parents aren't really engaged, there's an opportunity we see to foster that sense of belonging and that inclusion. And we want to try and host just on the Friday, the end of each week, we want to host a barbecue, free barbecue. We're going to invite the parents. We're going to give them an opportunity to kick a soccer ball around. You know, the mom who drops the kids off and then runs away. The kids come all excited, oh, learn how to do a quarter kick today. And moms are like, we're going to actually just kind of have a fun fair type thing. So we'll encourage the moms to, hey, you try this, and just have, share a common activity, bond with some other parents and participants, and get to know some of the people that maybe they've seen in passing. We want to actually encourage some authentic interaction and all of those magical belonging themes, right? That's what we're trying to do. So we're going to apply for $5,000 from the KOCF to fund our free to the participant barbecue as part of our soccer camps. So just so you have an understanding, that's the idea, that's the theme. My grant application has got to work that out. We'll flesh all that out and what that means, but that's the idea that we're talking about. I will say financial statements help to tell that story, and the program budget hopefully will help to tell that story. As the numbers guy, right, I recognize it's not all about numbers, and we'll say the numbers do tell the story. So that's where we're going. That's a little bit of the overview and the start. Before we get too much further though, one of the things that we talk about is the requested financial information. We ask you for a whole pile of stuff that comes with your application, and maybe it leaves you feeling a little bit overwhelmed. Let me assure you, and hopefully at the end of the next, 10 or 15 minutes or so, you will believe me when I say this is not a make-work project. We're not trying to overwhelm you, and there's not a magic formula that says this is exactly what you have to do and my stuff doesn't line up. I'm going to go through what we asked for, what we're doing with it, and a little bit of why the differences and things like that. So hopefully you won't feel like this at the end. When you apply, we ask for audited financial statements, right? In the package, we ask for interim financial statements or internal financial statements. We ask for your organization budget, and we ask for a program budget. I recognize at the back that some of the stuff is low, but those are the 4 things generally that we're looking for. As part of and it can be maybe a little overwhelming. Hopefully it's not. We start with why. Why do we ask for these things? Whole story. As I said, financial statements do help to tell the story of your organization. Right? We're going to walk through them a little bit. The package of financial information actually does get reviewed by some finance types. They go through a school of accountancy review, so there are finance and accounting students who actually do take a look at the package, and they help to highlight trends. I will say they can also note any areas of concern, areas of strength, and that's done for our grants committee, who will ultimately be reviewing the package, so they get a sense of what's going on. Grants committee are not necessarily finance people, right? So they may be as confused by this package as some of you may be, if that happens to be, and that's okay. We're not asking them there for that expertise. So the package, though, does go through a somewhat technical review, as it were, or a detailed finance people actually do look at the package. First thing in our that we asked for, we said were the audited financial statements. I'm going to talk a little bit about those. Here's the best that we had done. This is what it would look like. That annual audit. You get the package, and they come in nice shiny paper and all that stuff. That's the package that we're looking for. The format that you should have. This should certainly not be at all any make-work project, because you should have these things. If you're an organization that does not have an audit or is not required to have an audit, fine, we're not asking you to go out and do an audit. If you've got review statements, we'll take those. But we're looking for basically the public, the external, the final financial statements. We like the audit because the audit brings with it a sense of credibility, right? You've had the auditors come in, they've done their nasty audit stuff. I used to be one of those guys, right? They've done their audit, they go through, and this is the final product. Really, the final product is the one page that's attached to the financial statements that says, we've audited these statements, they're not materially misstated. Basically, that's an external review of the numbers as they're presented to say these are fairly presented, right? I've done some examples before. Sorry, let me back up. So if I were actually to try and get you an audited set of statements for an active kids KW, it doesn't exist, right? There is no auditor that's gone out there. I could fake something, but there's not, I don't have an audit that's done, right? So my fake application would fall apart at this stage because I don't have anything to support it. But you get the idea. We're looking for these audited statements. Credibility on these is really high. Admittedly, timing is off because audit stuff, it's all historical looking. It's backwards, it's what's happened in the past, and many times we'll say, happened in the past doesn't reflect what we're doing now, and we get that, but the financial statements do tell a story. We like the high credibility, even though they're potentially old. To use the example that we have, and potentially really old depending on when this happens, because you're only going to have audited statements probably once a year. And they take a little bit of time to produce, so right now, at the KWCF, I just went through my audit. My auditors were on site last week. I don't have audited statements for 2015 yet. I have internals and all the rest of that stuff, but really the last set of audited signed statements that I could produce would be December 2014, and that's a year plus ago at this stage. A few weeks from now, I'll have my 2015, and that brings the timing up. But we recognize that there's a history on that. It's okay, right? We're not freaking out too much about that. We'll take what you've got, most up to date as we can. We understand that there is that timing. But we like the high credibility, timing maybe not so good. So the second part that we ask for is also what we would call the internal. I'm going to talk through this slide a little bit. And this incorporates, in this example, two things that we ask for. We ask for your interim internal financial statements. How are you doing so far this year? We also ask for your organizational budget. What's the plan for this year? So I've incorporated this in my internal report for Active Kids KW. And so you can see on the left-hand side, the revenue and expenses. You can see the categories, the major categories of how our organization, where it comes from. And the first column represents my annual budget. That's the plan for the year. Okay? I have a year end, you can see at the top is September 30th, 2016. And these numbers represent numbers to January 31st, my January statements. Got a little bit of variance, how am I doing, my analysis in the year, and a prior year comparison in my internal report. I would say this is my internal report. I did not make this up for the grant application. This is how I help to manage my organization, right? Hopefully you have something that looks like this in your organization. That's what we're asking for. The timing brings it right up to current, right? I've got this for January 31st. We're in February now. Can't do better than that. It is looking forward with the annual budget that reflects the plan for the year and how I'm doing so far in the year. They tell a different story, a story that's a little bit different than what the audited statements do. Because again, I said the audited statements are all about what happened. This incorporates what's happening so far and where we're going. Really, we're more interested in where you're going than where you've been, but where you've been tells a bit of the story as well. So this is really what we're looking for. I know many of our applicants have some, like they start to freak out about this stuff a little bit. Say, oh, I don't have to do, you probably shouldn't be making this up. I would say if you're an organization that doesn't have something like this, probably got some other concerns. Like how are you managing? How do you know what's going on as you progress? What's the plan? All of those things raise larger issues. But this, when we ask for this, the big overwhelming, oh, this financial reporting and everything, hopefully it's not that big a deal. We're looking for this type of information. I do recognize in this example, and maybe your organization doesn't produce statements every month. Maybe you do it quarterly. Maybe I've heard one organization does it, their year falls into 3 distinct cycles, and so they do a third of the year. Whatever that is, I mean, we like it to be as up-to-date as possible, but you get the story. What we're asking for in this is, how are you doing so far, and what's the year actually looking like? That's why we ask for those numbers. Talk a little bit about Active Kids KW and what the story that these statements are telling in a little bit more detail so you get a sense of my organization. You can see that our 3 major revenue sources, in this case, come from grants, from fundraising, and from participant fees in that order. You get the significance. Most of the money comes from grants. We do have a fundraising responsibility, and my participant fees are relatively token. We charge a small amount to get a little bit of commitment from the participants, but we're not trying to be cost prohibitive. We're not an expensive camp by any means, but that's where we do get a source of revenue from our participant fees. So the budget of $135,000, you can see where that is spent, primarily salary, wages, and benefits. Right? We hire a bunch of summer students, so that's the salary, wages, and benefit line is a significant component there. The rest of the organization is run with 2 people for the rest of the year. They're not full-time people, but they do commit to it, a big portion of their time. And that's a lot of the administration, the promotion, the fundraising, the grant applications, all of those things that go along with running the camp. The big kick is the summer camp. We also run some other things around school breaks, right, to encourage sport, health, and well-being in kids. You can see we have some direct program costs outside of the salaries, and then my office and administration, there are some other costs that cost to run the place. On a total of about $133,000, I'm projecting a $2,000 surplus this year. Bit of a cushion if everything doesn't quite go so well. You can see in my year-to-date column, so that tells a little bit about the story where my money's coming from and how we're doing. Year-to-date, here's where I expect to be. So I said my year-end is September 30th. January 31st so far, I expected to receive about a $50,000 grant, and hey look, I got it, right? My variance is 0 on that. That's one grant that we get that promotes, that supports a lot of that, and that comes in the fall. I knew that was coming, we got it, we're off to a good start. My fundraising activities, I expect it to be at about $20,000 so far. It's a little bit back-end weighted because we have a better, with the soccer camp being a significant part of what we do, some of my fundraising happens closer to the activity. It's harder to raise money early on for events that are happening later, but we're on track and we're actually a little ahead of the game where we need to be right now. You can see my participant fees, I expected to raise about $2,000 so far, only got $1,375. Story behind that, we're trying to branch out a little bit, and you can see that in the plan. Last year we only did $750 in participant fees. We wanted to add a couple of activities in the school breaks, so like the Christmas break, and we'll have another one in March break, to promote some small programs that we're running. So a little bit of programming participant fees in there. The one in Christmas didn't kick off as well as we had hoped, so we're a little under budget so far. The offsetting side of that was that we didn't quite incur all the salaries, wages, and benefits. The hours weren't as high, we didn't have as many fees, we didn't have to hire as many, so there's some savings on the bottom line there. You can see the variances on my program costs in my own office and admin. Those are just minor timing things, we're on track. So the story that is being told that you can see here, I've got an organization, I can explain what's going on. Year to date, where I expect to be, I'm in good shape. I'm actually ahead of where I said I was going to be. Gives you a little bit of confidence, right, that this plan that I've got for the year, we kind of know what we're doing, we're on track, we're monitoring that. I've got answers for what's going on. These are all the story that the statements tell us. Now, I don't know that you would have necessarily jumped to all those things, and you need a little bit of help in the explanation, but hopefully you can see that the numbers actually do tell the story consistently with the rest of my grant application as we work along. So that's a little bit about why. That's what we're doing with some of this, and we're taking a high-level look and seeing what's going on. Yeah, this is not a magical formula, I will say that, right? Don't go running and copying this stuff. You should probably have it. I would say organizationally, if you don't have something like this, and that would be helpful, talk to the people who produce your reports. It is helpful, but that's a management thing. That's not a grant application thing, right? And so hopefully those things work your way through. Just take some time to develop and into your own unique, what's important to you, where does your money come from, where does it go, what are the things that you want to be watching and monitoring. That's a little bit about internal statements. The next thing that we ask for, and I don't have a good slide because we're going to talk about this more in more detail, and I do have an example that will come, but we also ask for the program budget. And this one so far, I don't necessarily, well, I would internally, but the program budget is different. It's a blow up of a small piece of your operational budget, potentially. Sometimes that's the case. Some organizations, the grant application or the program that they're running is a very small piece of a very big organization. In other cases, it could be a very big piece of a small organization. And you may have, some small organizations may have a program in place that they want to run that would be new and transformative and very different from what they've done in the past. Maybe, doubling. If I can get a grant for $50,000, I can take my $50,000 organization to a $100,000 organization. those are some of the pieces that we're looking at as far as what's happened, and your chance of success really was what it comes down to. We want to put our money, as we have limited resources going out in the community, what are the chances that you can actually pull that off? And it's not that the financial statements tell the only story and say, sorry, this is a big project on a small organization, you're out. Not at all, that's not what I'm saying. But it does help to scope and scale and say, how will you be able to pull off what you're trying to do? And admittedly, right, it's different if you've got a $10,000 project on a $1 million organization. It's very different from a $100,000 project on a $150,000 organization. And so those will possibly raise some questions. That's what we're going at. And so this third part, and we'll spend more time talking about this component as we work through the presentation. But it's in conjunction, it's the sort of that fourth piece that we asked for. So the audit statements, the internal and the interim statements, the organizational budget, probably combined together, and then the program budget. Hopefully, again, this is not a make-work project. Hopefully we haven't overwhelmed your finance people in that they can just produce what you've already got, would be the goal. So that's a little bit about the requested financial information. We're going to start to move on to how do you actually strengthen your budget and what does it look like. Success doesn't come to you. You can go to it. There are some things that you can do that you can check to hopefully improve applications, strengthen your application, and that's what we want to focus on. Try to be positive with a number of questions rather than saying, hey, this is weak, we say, how do you strengthen, that sort of thing. And in doing that, some of the common themes that we've seen, and again, I've had a chance to review and talk to different people on our grants committee and people who are involved, say, what are some of the common themes that you see that cause some problems, that raise some concerns, that leave you scratching your head, and we'll try and address that. So we've got really three questions. The first one being, is the program budget complete? You might be surprised, we don't always get complete information, and complete information is stronger information. I would say that. I would say complete in a twofold manner, two different ways. One is it complete in the context of the program. I'm going to go back to the example that I used. I said we're applying for $5,000 to run a barbecue for an end of camp event. The detail, I would say a complete program budget is not just about the $5,000 and how I'm going to spend that $5,000. A complete program budget in this case would be my soccer camp. Because my application, everything about this, it's not really about a barbecue. I run barbecues on my weekend and I'm not getting funding for that, right? Well, why? Because I'm trying to socialize with my friends. We're trying to enhance our soccer camp activity, and so really it's in the context of the whole camp budget that we're talking here. So a complete program budget, in this case, would incorporate the details of the event, but in the context of the soccer camp, which again we said is in the context of the whole organization. The budget that we're talking about will be the summer camp, and I do have an example that we'll walk through. But we want to make sure that it is complete, and the reason for that, it tells the story, right? If I just get the details around a $5,000 barbecue, and I'm a grant committee member, I'm going to quite possibly scratch my head and say, what's this about? But if I talk about the summer camp, like the camp experience and how the whole thing works, I get a better sense of the story of what's going on. So budget helps that way. Secondly, it just also needs to be complete in its details. It should be a no-brainer, but I'm going to say it anyway. You need to make sure that it actually includes everything. So in my example, I'm running a barbecue, and if I don't have a food line in there that somehow incorporates the food, it's probably not complete, right? If I don't have a way to cook it, it's probably not complete. But we don't want to raise those kind of questions with the committee, so we want to be able to answer those things and make sure that they are complete in its details as well as in its context. Sometimes I will say in getting the whole context, if this grant gets read by someone, admittedly, I'm only asking for $5,000 for a barbecue, but maybe somebody reads this who is interested in youth activity, and they can see more about my organization, they can see my organizational financial statements, they can see what I'm doing. Maybe I've talked about the programming expansion, and I want to try and expand into, the March break activities or something like that, but I don't have money for that right now. That's not in the current plan. Maybe somebody says, that's a great idea, and I would love to support that, and I have money that they want to come and talk to me about my organization. They can start to get a bit more of a sense that they would never see if it's just about $5,000 for a barbecue, right? And I need money for renting a barbecue and buying food. So that's another possible side benefit as far as who may see some of this information. The second question to ask, is it consistent with the grant application? We want to make sure that the details in the budget are consistent, obviously, with the written explanation of what's going on. Again, maybe you'll say, but of course, but in my world, right, again, I said I'm the numbers guy, I'm the finance guy, and I tend not to be the one who writes flowery stories, and I tend not to be the one who actually fills in a lot of the grant application details. There's the application, I'm the guy where somebody comes knocking on my door and says, hey, I need a budget, and you're the numbers guy, and so give me a budget for this thing. You want to make sure that it's consistent. And so the fact that there are probably, possibly, two different people who are incorporating the components of this, I want to make sure that they are talking to each other and that the information flows through. Second one. The third question, I know it's a little bit low, does it demonstrate the likelihood of program success? This one's a little bit tougher to nail exactly, but really, I'm talking about how well thought out. Have I appropriately thought out my program? Can I explain it? Have I explained it well? There's a question of what happens if you don't get the grant, right? In this case, my story, we'll flip back to that, the Active Kids KW, that application, it's okay. If I don't get the money, we don't encourage belonging, I can sell all that stuff, but my camp is not in jeopardy. The kids will still run, I will still run the soccer camp, I'll run 5 weeks, I have money for the coaches, the staffing, all of that, that's not what we're asking about. So really the difference will come down to, if I don't get the money here, and I don't fundraise it in some other way, which is not part of my plan, if I don't get the grant, then Friday afternoon rolls along, and I say, thanks kids, have a great day, and the kids go home, right? And we don't have a barbecue. It's not the end of the world as far as the camps go. It's unfortunate, I think we have a good opportunity, and so I'm not trying to sell myself short on that. We have a good opportunity to promote belonging and do all those wonderful things that the KWCF is trying to do. But I make it clear that it's not contingent on, program success is not contingent on this necessarily. And I'll tell you, and I'll show you where the rest of my money is coming from and how we're going to make the camps actually work. This is not uncommon because often the grant applications that do come to the KWCF have multiple funding sources. And maybe you've got a donor that has secured their 50% of it. Maybe you've got a grant application out to Trillium or other funding sources. Maybe there's a question mark that says, I don't know, we still need to raise $10,000 out of my $100,000 budget, and I'm not exactly sure where that is. If you can show what's going on with that and what your plans are in the whole process and help with your budget to tell that story, it makes it clearer so the grant committee knows what's going on. And can make appropriate funding decisions. So those are my two. Yeah.
I always think if you do have, say, some other proposals out in progress. I always feel like not comfortable saying who we're asking. Is it acceptable to say like just other applications in progress or something like that to that effect?
Yeah, that's fair. I understand sometimes there may be confidentiality and things with that. And yeah, that's fine. It's more a sense of how sure are you? Right? Because sometimes there can be a project and it's a no-brainer to me, I know what's going on, I have secured that. Or I'm funding a major portion of this through my other regular operations and my operations are fine. That's not always clear in the numbers that come through to us. And so, for example, if I've got I'll pick a round number, but I've got a $100,000 application and you're asking for 10, right? In your mind it may be, I need this 10, it puts me over the top, I can do extra stuff, but the 90 is secure, and that may be very clear in your mind. It may come to us and say, you're asking for 10, but I don't know where the other 90 is coming from. And if that doesn't come, like 10 doesn't run it, right? Like you can't run this thing on $10,000 and be short 90. You can run it maybe with 90 and not have the 10, and so we would like to participate in that. So there's just a lot of, I don't really know. I don't get that sense. And so certainly stronger budgets demonstrate the likelihood of, one, where they are. So it's not about naming this is where you go, as much as trying to portray again, that chance of success and what's happening. Okay, so that's, those are some of the pretty basic things around how to strengthen your budget. Thirdly, we're going through some time. There's just a few kind of tips and tricks that we wanted to pass along. First of all, it's not magic. There's not some magic formula. Like I say, don't flood us with soccer camp applications thinking that's how you're going to get $5 grand. That's not the case. And it's not about, you'll notice here, I haven't, and I intentionally have stayed away from showing like, here's a template, here's the sample of what you need to fill out, and this is the formula and what a budget should look like. No, the budget should tell your story, your unique story, lay it out as you tell your story. So unfortunately, first of all, it's not magic. Secondly, consider your audience. And we've spoken about this a little bit. The audience primarily is the grants committee. The grants committee are volunteer members of the community. So really, in a lot of respects, you could be the audience, right? You're not writing it for me, the finance guy. The whole application is going to people who are trying to make these decisions as best they can. They're hired for they're taking on, they're volunteers as a knowledge of community and wanting to help in that way. They recognize that they probably know absolutely nothing about your project. And there's a good chance they know absolutely nothing about your organization, depending on who your organization is. And so sometimes it's easy to forget that. And the world that I live in, right, I live in numbers, and I think everybody understands the KWCF and how we work and where our money comes from and all that. No, that's not the case, and we're doing this. The audience in this case probably doesn't know anything about the project that you're writing, so you need to start basically from zero. And good chance they don't even know your organization that well. So we want to kind of explain that and help. Next one. I want to say, you want to, as I talked before, often there are finance people and there are program people, and those are two different sections that need to come together. I would encourage, get it together, people, right? Get your people together earlier on in the process. Hopefully the written application, kind of this side of it, the program side of it, the written application should highlight and support what's coming from the budget. Correspondingly, the budget should be highlighting and working and corresponding with what the program is driving at. That's where the uniqueness of your story comes in, and you can build your program budget in that vein. What do you want to tell us? Right? What's important? What do you want to highlight? You can highlight it with the numbers, and you can highlight it with the written application. My experience has been, and I've applied for I've been involved with applications for a couple of different grants in a previous life, and it played out exactly like this. Somebody said, oh, there's a grant application that we're applying for, and eventually they write all this stuff up, and then they come running into my office like, 2 days before, saying, oh, we need a budget. Give me a budget, and I'm trying to put something together. And my first question is always, can I read your application? Oh, it's not done yet. Well, that's not very helpful. I don't know what you want me to highlight. What are you asking for? Not only in the details, I want to make sure that the numbers are consistent with what we're talking about, but also, how do you want to lay this out? Are they funding salaries? Or are they not funding salaries? Or what are they interested in? Knowing that, I can build it. So as the people can get together, that is certainly helpful, and generally the results of that effort strengthen application. Next one says a lot of time is not on your side. My experience tells me that even as much as I try and plan ahead and leave lots of time, I'm always running up against deadlines with this stuff. So I throw that out there as a reminder and encouragement. If you're one of those people who can get stuff done super fast and well in advance of deadlines, man, I wish I could, but that's not my experience. Things always take longer than I expect, and we don't leave enough time for reviews. What I've found, one of the tricks, I asked, what would you recommend, what would you say, what would you advise people? He said, you know what, do the application, finish it, put it in a drawer, leave it for 2 days, and then go read it again. It requires you to have 2 days of cushion time, but you'd be amazed, and this is true, you'd be amazed what you can find 2 days later. I thought I was particularly clear, and when I read it with fresh eyes myself after having written it, ooh, I'm glad I caught that, If things are running up against the deadline, and I'm firing this off to be reviewed, and I haven't had a chance to give it any time to percolate and sit, they look nutty. Which leads us to some of this, kind of check your work, right? These are the kind of mistakes that come through. 1 and 1 doesn't equal 3. And sometimes this stuff happens, and the credibility, quite honestly, as I speak to this, the credibility on this can just plummet. The confidence plummets. And I'll say, and I want to be gracious, right, and say, I understand people make mistakes, and it's not about perfection and all of that, but by the same token, the grants committee is trying to decide among 2 equally good applicants. If I've got two equally good applications and limited resources, maybe sometimes I'm looking for a reason, which one do I have more confidence in? And if I start finding this kind of stuff, or things that really aren't clear, this kind of stuff leads me to the if you're not getting this right, how are you going to run a program? Right? If I can't add up the numbers in my budget, you're really going to pull off hiring 10 students for coaches and organizing an event and making sure that you have everything and pulling it off successfully. It kind of leads in that vein, if you get my drift. So you got a little bit of time, but also just sort of check your work. Frequently the result of just being rushed, in my experience. And let me say, I'm guilty of this. If you saw at the time, my PowerPoint was updated for this presentation. 11, quarter after 11 last night, that kind of stuff. So I'm not trying to be critical, but that's just the reality. Finally, my last slide here, have an outside party review your package. Right? I said it's good, put it in a drawer, review it yourself after a couple of days, and pass it off to somebody else. When I say outside, doesn't necessarily mean outside your organization. Pick someone who hasn't read it, hasn't reviewed it, maybe doesn't know a lot about what's going on. I've used the example before. Well, sorry, in that vein, usually what you would find, that person will probably have some questions, and maybe in areas where you thought you were completely clear and you understood, oh, I've taken for granted that I know what's going on and I haven't maybe explained something as well as I could. It's sort of that person who can fill in as a quasi-grants committee member who, like we said, doesn't know anything about your organization, doesn't know anything about your program. All they have is what's in front of them. So getting somebody else to review that gives you a little bit of feedback to say what was clear, what wasn't clear, do they understand what's going on. You can anticipate that, you can clean up that application, you can make it stronger, and those would be the ones that have a better chance of coming across the grants committee member. They read it, anticipates what I needed, everything is answered, I have every confidence to say, I think this is a good project that should be supported, and let that work through the process. I used the example earlier. I've often done this stuff with my wife. My wife is very different from I am. I'm the numbers guy. She's more artsy. And so often I have presentations to people who are not necessarily numbers people. I'll say, okay, you have to sit here and listen to my presentation and then tell me it doesn't make any sense. And she provides great feedback at times where I think, oh, you don't know what audited statements are? I can't take 30 seconds and say, audited statements, that's what we need, let's move on. Maybe I need to spend a little bit more time explaining just what that is. And the 2-minute explanation rather than the 30-second explanation helps a whole lot, and she has that much more confidence. I encourage you on that. That's sort of my last tip and trick. We're going to go back. I said we have the example, and we've got a few minutes left. We're back to my Active Kids KW, and while I said I have a budget, I have a handout that we'll hand out. I want to walk through this. This is not a magic formula, right? Hopefully what we can do, and we'll walk through this, let me just take it through. Ask you to pass them back, if you would. Thank you. Okay, so in the example, I just want to highlight a few things of what I'm trying to do. Again, we're trying to be consistent with the story that I've been telling about this application. You can see here on the example that this is my soccer camp budget. So in the context of the whole soccer camp, which is a piece of my organizational budget, not the whole thing. But I have shown the total amount. So my budget for the camp is $31,250, both revenue and expense. You can see that I have a balanced budget. One of the things that I've done, in the very first left-hand column, you can see the revenue and expenses in those major categories, what's coming from grants, the participant fees, salaries, wages and benefits, and program costs. Those actually tie back to my internal financial statements. The same summary report that I had and had my budget analysis and all that. You can see that it's clear. People like me, I like those kind of things, and say, oh, where would it fit in this chart? And I've tried to make it very clear. Here are the grants, here are the participant fees. If you remember, the other category that I had was fundraising. My budget doesn't have any fundraising directly related to the soccer camp, so that's not a part of it. But that's the first column, I've left that. Then indented from there, I've given you a little bit more detail as far as what we've done. And I'll say, in this attempt, really the application is about a $5,000 application for the barbecue. And you can see those I've highlighted in blue. Just an idea to let them stand out a little bit. You can see in the context of the whole budget what I'm asking for, but you also get a sense of more of how the program works and how we run the camps. Not trying to be like nitpicky with this stuff, but I'm trying to give you a little bit of a detail that you get a sense of how the program works and where the money comes from, where the money goes. The additional thing too, and remember I said we want to know where the rest of it works, and so the question of how much confidence do we have in me being able to run the program, certainly I've added, you can see that I have the very top, the student wage grant, coming from the Canada Summer Jobs Program. That's where the money's coming from, the applications, that's the expectation. I'm trying to communicate that in a pretty simple way. That's what we've tried here, specifying the parent event grant from KWCF. It's clear, this is what we're asking for us in this case. Then I get into even more detail at the bottom in the blue. You can see the components that I've included in my budget here. We talked about equipment rental. I don't have barbecues. It's not something that I do normally as part of my camp, and so I'm going to have to rent barbecues. If the weather is a little inclement, then I've got a tent rental just in case, like a little shelter. I've estimated those to be about $300 per event, so I've spelled that out. And 5 events, 300 times 5, that's your 1,500, right? I didn't quite spell out the extension, but you'll get the sense, right? We're still pretty smart people, so we can do that, but at least the information is consistent and we're working that through. You can see the supplies, and we talked about this in the earlier session. I've said just barbecue supplies, $500 a week. If I want to instill even more confidence in my written application, I'm going to talk a little bit about what those supplies are. So I'll make sure that you know that I've included the food in that, and I've included the condiments, and I've thought about the ice, and I've got beverages, right? All those things that are involved. And I'll say that helps to increase, it's not about listing the line, it's not about detailing all that stuff, but I would say it increases your confidence if you know that I've thought about, I need ice, right? I need buckets and I need ice and I need to keep the drinks cold. You have a little bit more confidence that maybe that guy knows what he's doing, as opposed to just, I don't know, barbecue stuff, right? It doesn't necessarily look different, but I can spell out that detail, and you can have confidence. If I've thought about napkins, I probably remember getting garbage cans so I don't leave the field a mess. And that sort of increasing the confidence, and I can do that through some of the detail. We talked a little bit about advertising and promotion. If I'm going to pull this thing off, I need to get the parents there, I need to tell them about it, and so I'm going to have to create some posters and some flyers and spend a little bit of time, a little bit of money, advertising, making sure that people know about the event. And then I talked a little bit about event prizes. I think I had said earlier that one of the things we want to encourage participation in soccer and part of the event that way. And so the plan is to get made up logoed soccer balls, those little mini soccer balls. So we'll give those out as participant prizes, a little bit of an advertising for our organization so that the kids see it and they're playing with this thing next year and they remember, hey, I want to go to the soccer camp next year as well. That's a little bit about the detail in our budget. Hopefully you can see this helps to tell the story, right? It's consistent, it strengthens what I've talked about, what I would put in my written application in a level of detail that's appropriate for the application that we're talking about. These are unique, and they will be unique to each organization, to each grant application, to each story. Hopefully you get a sense of where you can move and strengthen the applications in that way.